Welcome to Too Much. We're doing another solo episode. It seems that these career little pods, career little silos have been supportive and been helpful. So in that vein, we're going to do a few more and all the different subjects of little things that have helped me along my career journey. And today we are talking about a subject, one that I know far too well and begrudgingly so. We are going to talk about wounded ambition versus healthy ambition. And this might be a novel or new concept to some of you. Some of you might be like, girl, I know exactly what you're talking about. And I hope that we're going to help introduce some people to this subject matter. And for other people, I hope this becomes an opportunity to investigate, or potentially you already are investigating, and an opportunity to transmute it. So I spent probably the first more years than I've been working in wounded ambition. It's only very recently that I have shifted my way of working. And this process began when I shut down my startup. It was the first time in my life where I didn't know what to do next. I always knew what to do next, or had an inclination or intuition. And this was the first time I was stuck, truly stuck and lost. And in that void, I was forced to re-examine everything, every single aspect of my life, to decipher what wasn't working and what was working. And it turns out that a lot of the software that I call our brain needed updating. And so through that examination, what emerged was a different understanding of the life I wanted to live, and likely the one I'd always been seeking, but I hadn't realized there was another way to function. And this is when my ambition began to mutate. Like what once used to suffocate me. Let me explain my wounded ambition. How do I explain this? When I was a kid, I couldn't wait to work. Work was my flavor of avoidance. I became a workaholic, and that was my way of numbing myself. And so it suffocated me. Before I got to college, I had this deep fear that I was never going to be able to accomplish everything that I sought to in my life, in my lifetime. And that depth of fear really propelled me to achieve, which some would say, oh, that's a really good coping mechanism, or that's good that you achieve so much. And yes, but at the same time, when your achievement comes from this place of wounding, it's not the same as healthy achievement, which is what we're going to get into deeper today. It would keep me up at night. My dreams, I felt like oftentimes like I couldn't breathe. It ate at my insides slowly. It was like a parasite, is sort of the best way to put it. Like it glotched onto me and overtook me. I sort of liken it to Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, where my ambition was my monster. It was my inner, maybe it was unworthiness, inner fear of wasting this beautiful one precious life. And I was in a rush 24/7 to try and get to the next dream or the next thing, check the next box. And I can tell you, waking up, mid-30s and very few boxes are checked. Plenty of like life boxes checked, but the traditional boxes unchecked didn't make a difference. And that when I shut down my company, I had to reconcile that I had started working at 18 years old, full-time, worked full-time while I was in college, and thought I was ahead, and then to realize I was now behind was a really challenging concept for me to process. And so in that investigation, I figured out how to walk alongside my ambition to make it a friendly companion instead of a parasite. And I started to find harmony with my Mr. Hyde. So I often think about life in this way. You might agree or disagree, but I think there are events that happen in life and people you meet that become clear, bifurcated pre and post moments. So I can think of decisions like a job I took became a clear pre and post moment. A friend that I became friends with became a clear pre and post moment. Because you become an irrevocably different person having that experience, event, or relationship. So much so you can pinpoint in extreme specificity when these events happened, and they become the key chapters in the timeline of our life. And so the fallout of my company is a very vital pre and post moment in the memoir of Denise Love Hewitt. The period before my company shut down was the age of wounded ambition. And now after is what I call healthy ambition. And so as I've been sharing this framework, this concept or word, wounded ambition, seems to strike a chord. And many of us relate to the concept of wounded ambition, but the concept of healthy ambition feels a little more nebulous in the capitalistic paradigm that we are ensconced in. And so what does healthy ambition actually look like? One of the big misconceptions is that your ambition wanes when you enter a healthier paradigm. This comes up a lot where people are like, well, if I tame my inner monster and my ambition, what if I don't want to do big things anymore? And there's a very big fear that you're going to lose a part of your identity or a part of yourself if you change that relationship. That all of a sudden this thing you've become so dependent on to be part of your identity or how you see the world or how you see yourself in the world is going to change. And the reality is it will change. But for the better, because we think as humans, like, what do I have to lose? What am I losing to get this thing? And the reality is when you lose something, you gain something. And so for me, I still have insanely big dreams, but they no longer keep me up at night. They no longer ask me to neglect myself in their pursuit. For me, it means creating projects that I love the process of, this podcast. I focus less on how the work is received, which was a big, big shift for me. I still do some check-ins to see, okay, are we making progress? Does it make sense? Is there growth? Is it reaching people? Is it reaching people outside of my immediate friend circle? But it's not the main driver. Outcome is no longer the main driver. And that was a very hard shift for me. But I realized that when I made the process the main driver, I became more present. Life became more joyful. And so the joy is the point. And then the other piece of this is that the work must energize you, not deplete. I repeat, the work must energize you, not deplete. Now, let's not confuse that with I had a bad day. So today was a hard day and today I got drained. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about, for example, when I moved to LA, I had this executive producer job. And I just remember I moved here for this job, uprooted my whole life overnight. And I would wake up in the morning, and I lived in LA standards, very close to the office, like a 10, 15-minute drive to the office. Like this is in LA, you could be an hour away from one side of town to the other side of town. And I would just dread getting up in the morning. I'd be like, I'm really pushing it to the max here. I'm going to be late to work. And there was no reason for that other than I felt this dread that I did not want to be there. And the difference is when I look at the things that I do now that are largely self-motivated, I'm not a salaried person. I work gig to gig. I create my own opportunity. I do not feel any of that dread. There might be days where I'm like, oh, I really can't write this today. I'm just not in the zone. But that doesn't mean that in 3 days I won't be. I'm usually eventually get in the zone. I don't feel this existential dread that I just don't want to do the thing. And so that for me is a distinction that job was a depletion job. And even though I was good at it and made good money and was validated for it, it did not energize me. So now I check in and I ask myself if the work aligns with my value system. Does this feel exciting? Does this feel life-giving? Does it feel like it matters? Because those are some of my values that I care about impact. Do I feel fulfilled? And healthy ambition means that when we're looking at what aligns with our value system, sometimes that means that we walk away from opportunities that feel misaligned, even lucrative ones. I did that this summer. There was a job that came up that would have been a substantial check that I walked away from because it did not align with my value system. Because I believe that once you get a taste of the life you want to live, a joyful, energizing life, it's very hard to go back. And I said no because I know the moral and the mental cost is one that I am no longer willing to pay. And so even though that job would have given me significant money, I knew that what was going to happen was I was going to come back from that job and have a month where I was just getting myself back to alignment. And that was a big cost because once you're in alignment, life magnetizes to you. It flows to you. Doors open. You meet interesting people. You are present. The world is vibing. And so to give up a month of that, it was not worth it to me because I knew eventually that I would make more money staying in a state of alignment than I would to do this and get out of alignment. It was also me telling the universe, once again, I'm living in healthy ambition. I'm not going back to that other time. I'm not living in scarcity. I'm not living in fear. I am choosing the life that lights me up, that I believe is of greatest service to the world. And healthy ambition also means that I can celebrate others, people's success without feeling shitty about myself, without doing the compare despair dance that many of us do with social media. I used to do that thing where it was like I'd see it and I'd be happy for them, but then I'd feel a twinge of like, why didn't I get that job? Why is that happening to me? And now I'm like, you're doing your thing, you're on your journey, I'm on mine, and I don't feel a type of way about it because I trust the path that I'm on and I'm no longer outcome focused. And also my ambition is not coming from this place of wounding. And so from this new vantage point, I can see that the quality of my leadership has evolved as well. I used to feel an insane sense of urgency that made it very hard to be present, which is fundamental in leadership. You need to be able to be present. And now I have so much more space because I'm not in this imaginary rush that time's going to run out. And that space affords me time to dive deeper with my team, be more generous, be more loving, be more present. And it makes a difference to the people that I work with, that work for me, because I am showing up in a way that is more thoughtful and less urgent. And the most important part of healthy ambition for me is that the people I love are not collateral damage to my goals. They're an essential component to what I'm building. And after I shut down my company, my best friend from high school got married and I went to her wedding. And I had spent my childhood, her parents got divorced, she was an only child, so I was her pseudo sibling. I would go with her on family vacations with her dad and his new partner. I spent a lot of time with her mother. They were my second family. And then when I was at her wedding, I saw both her parents and their new partners. And I started crying because I realized that I had been to New York many times in the span of my company and when I was building it and did not see them because I felt too busy, that I had too many important meetings and no time. And it's a regret for me because that's not how I like to think of myself. And I said, I will not do that again. I will not be the person that takes for granted these people who were second family to me. And I probably went close to a decade without seeing them. And now when I go to New York, I text them both every time. And I realize that if the job is asking me to sacrifice the most meaningful relationships in my life, that's probably not the right job. Or I'm not approaching the work the right way. Because when we pass, which if you listen too much, I spend a lot of time thinking about end of life and the regrets that we have. I think if we want to live a present and fulfilled life now, we have to start asking those questions earlier so we have less regrets. And all the regrets that people have at the end of life are relational. They are, I did not spend enough time with the people that I loved. I did not have the guts to pursue my dreams. And they're all things that we can do right now and prioritize right now. And so these are the ways that we might all find ourselves on the road to healthy ambition. Okay, but let's go backwards. So that's a nice summation of healthy ambition. Great, great, great. Awesome, Denise. Thank you so much. I'm still in wounded ambition. Like, what are you talking about? So let's start there. Let's talk about where wounded ambition comes from. Growing up, we inherit stories from our country, our community, our families, And these stories become the rubric for how we live. They run our lives. So often in therapy, you'll hear, oh, trauma will end up running your life. The unconscious part of ourself, these stories that we've learned when we were largely less conscious, become the automatic drivers of our car, our little human car, and they run our lives. And so part of why getting conscious, going to therapy, understanding ourselves is important, because we can get out of those storylines quicker. And so a lot of us are in this place, and that's just part of being human, is we have stories and limiting beliefs that we can address. And so when these stories remain unexamined, we remain on autopilot. And this is where wounded ambition is born. Perhaps we come from a family that made us feel we weren't enough, that we weren't allowed to ask for help, that we had to be perfect. Maybe we were parenting our parents. Sometimes we were severely bullied, and we carry a need to prove to those who hurt us that they were wrong, that they failed to see our brilliance. And maybe we only received love when we earned good grades or achieved something external. And these experiences leave us with a wound, a desperate need to prove our worth, to be seen. We believe achievement is the pill, the medicine that will finally deliver us the love that we've been seeking. And let me tell you, the ego and the psyche are formidable forces to reckon with. But the gift of this inquiry is the opportunity to reclaim control of our lives. And so for me, therapy was an essential guide on my journey. It helped me unravel some of the narratives that I had and why I had such a wounded ambition. And I want to be very clear that none of this was done alone. There were many teachers and methodologies involved. And my ambition changed over the course of many years and many steps. It was not an overnight pill. It was a commitment to living a different life, to getting a sense of I could build differently. And I will say, even now, every now and then you get like the taste of the unhealthy ambition, like a toxic boyfriend. And you're like, I could just like go, because it's comfortable for me. And I have to say, Denise, that's not who you want to be. That's not the career you want to build. It is unsustainable. It creates burnout. We don't want to do that. And so one of the first things I did to get out of wounded ambition into healthy ambition was to look at my value system. And so there are several methodologies in this department. So for example, Gallup has a strength finder poll that you can take. Susie Welch, who is an author and professor at NYU, has a test she has created called the Values Bridge. And both of those are really helpful. You can also do it the old-fashioned way like I did, because it was before I knew about all these tools. And I wrote out what mattered to me, what I wanted my life to look like, and I calculated how much money I'd need to make those dreams reality. And that clarity made it much easier to try and reverse engineer the life I actually wanted. So now with the tools I told you about, you can identify your core values much quicker. I will never gatekeep a life hack for you. So you can go online and take those tests, and I will also add them in the show notes so you can check them out. Or you can do it the old-fashioned way, but there's some language around values that Susie Welch has versus Gallup has, and you can decipher what resonates the most to you. And so the next piece is like, once you identify your values, okay, great. So for me, my top values, we can identify them. But the next question becomes, are we living them? Many people consider themselves generous. They say they care about giving back, but yet most work schedules make it more complicated to volunteer or dedicate time to altruistic causes. And so a lot of times these commitments are perpetually pushed aside. So for the life I'm working to inhabit, that became non-negotiable. So every 3 to 6 months, I spend a day volunteering in prison, which is a cause close to my heart. If you go to an early episode of this podcast, you can learn from Andrew Glazier, CEO of Defy Ventures, the organization that I have been volunteering with for almost a decade. And so this is not as substantial of a commitment that I would like to make. I would like to go more than every 3 to 6 months, but it's the one I can honor given my very unpredictable schedule. So being realistic about what we can do is the first step to living more fully in our value system. So instead of saying that's not possible, we need to ask, how can I make it possible? Is it important enough for me to try? We have to get radically honest. And if the answer is no, it's probably not as important of a value as you think it is. And that's okay. There is no judgment here. We all have our own values and the life that we want to live. And being honest about it is how we get to our own map of alignment and purpose. So never feel bad that maybe that's not a driver for you. No worries. Like, you don't have to feel bad about it because you're here to live your life, your blueprint, your alignment, your dream. Nobody else is. So that's just information for then you to ingest to design your life better. And so for me, volunteering once a quarter was how I can make it possible. And it's a way to honor a value that I hold. That's as good as I can do right now. Maybe in the future that will increase. And the reason our values are so important is because they are our portal into purpose. They're the compass to our true north. And if we bypass them, we will end up unhappy. And even when we identify our values, many of us still fall into the trap of chasing the wrong kind of satisfaction. So understanding them is only one part of the equation, living them is another. We also need to understand why chasing external achievements will never satisfy us. So you know how when you really want something, maybe a new phone or a promotion or a relationship, you think, once I get this, I'll be so happy. And then you get it and you are happy for a while. But pretty soon it just becomes normal. The excitement fades and you're back to feeling about the same as you did before you got it. And there's a name for this feeling. It's a psychological concept called the hedonic treadmill, honey. The hedonic treadmill. So it's like you're walking on a treadmill. You keep moving forward, getting new things, achieving goals, but you end up in the same emotional place. Your happiness level keeps returning to a similar baseline. And so despite the events humans experience, we generally maintain a constant level of happiness throughout our lives. We adapt to changes really quickly. I know you probably don't think so, but we do. Win the lottery, you'll be thrilled for months, maybe even a year. But research shows most lottery winners eventually return to around their pre-winning happiness level. This is why money and external achievements are not necessarily the answer. The same also happens for negative events. So people are remarkably resilient and we adapt to setbacks. It's why you see amidst like the horrors of the Holocaust, Viktor Frankl wrote a beautiful book called Man's Search for Meaning. And despite living through atrocity, humans still find this beautiful way to adapt and to find hope and to believe that life is worth living. And so that is what we see in the hedonic treadmill. So no matter what happens, good or bad, we come back to a relatively similar emotional baseline. And this is because we derive pleasure two ways. The first is hedonism, hence hedonic, which refers to the pleasure or happiness we get from doing what we like or avoiding what we don't like. So sex and food are probably the most well-known hedonistic pleasures. You know, I've been saying this, by the way, I'm like, maybe it's hedonic treadmill and not hedonic, but I think hedonic sounds a little chicer, but maybe it's hedonic. You know what, guys? Doesn't really matter. We're all human. I'm going to say hedonic treadmill. So hedonistic pleasures, we're all very familiar with hedonism. But the second way that we derive pleasure is eudaimonia, which is fulfillment from purposeful activities. And if we chase eudaimonia instead of hedonism, we are less susceptible to the hedonic treadmill. It actually takes longer for eudemonic pleasure to diminish. Okay, let's say that again. It takes longer for eudemonic pleasure to diminish. So when we are chasing pleasure that is purpose-driven, even though we might eventually go back to our baseline, the pleasure will remain longer than if we chase the quick cortisol hit of hedonistic pleasures. And this is why our values are so important. Because if we have an indicator of what makes us feel purposeful, we have better agency to follow the longer lasting version of pleasure. And this is exactly where my ambition transformation started to take hold. I stopped feeding it with a scarcity complex and a need for external validation, and I started nourishing my dreams with greater honesty, which led to deeper purpose. And ambition stopped feeling like something I had to fight against, but I could finally work with it. I asked my friend, Amina Zamani, who's also been on the podcast, an executive coach focused on neuroplasticity, to explain this idea a little more to me. And she shared that understanding the distinction between our mode of ambition is crucial, because when we finally achieve what we've been chasing, our bodies and minds respond in ways that we don't always expect. So this brings us to something a little tricky, is that once we experience financial freedom or basic needs being met, the brain and the body start to clock into what's been ignored. Because as I said earlier, remember, ambition for me was my mode of avoidance. So when all of a sudden I stopped using it as a mode of avoidance, things came up, right? Things surfaced in my system. And that's because the nervous system is no longer chasing survival or achievement in the same way. So when this happens, our suppressed emotions and unprocessed trauma can surface. The dopamine-driven pursuits quiet down, and the body finally has space to feel what has been previously numbed out. It often creates melancholy when it's not addressed. And this is where success can reveal parts of ourselves that our ambition once did a really good job of keeping hidden. And I would argue this happens more frequently if we are operating from a state of wounded ambition, because the wounded ambition is a method of avoidance. It is a wound that has to be healed. So we are using the ambition to mask something else. If we have healthy ambition, we might still have a state of melancholy, or things might come up once we get financial freedom. But I think I would like to do a study on this, to be honest with you, because there's no data on this, there's no proof of this. My instincts say that the feelings will be different if operating from wounded versus healthy ambition. And so if this does happen with healthy ambition, for example, at least now you have a clearer picture of how to solve the melancholia, whereas the wounded ambition is more work. And so post-company, this is my experience. A lot surfaced in the slowdown. I had to learn new tools, utilize my therapist, ask new questions, and start making some really tangible changes in my life to hold a more evolved ambition paradigm. And so in my own career, I've observed a plethora of wildly successful people, from Silicon Valley to Hollywood, billionaires to celebrities. And I can tell you pretty plainly that the people who garner what we deem success in this world are rarely happy. And largely because they're stuck on the hedonic treadmill and they are forsaking eudaimonia. Their ambition isn't derived from purpose, but from a need to prove something or to receive external validation. And there's a guy, Bruce Campbell of Blue Dot Advocates, who has years of experience working with executives and philanthropists who are supposedly winning. And he agrees. He states that the ironic thing is the people with the most wealth and power, the system isn't working for them either. In fact, if you're measuring an economy based on how effectively it allows us to develop happiness and well-being, I don't think it's making many capitalists happy. Something to think about for us. Do we want, in this world of success, what society deems success? If we're still not happy there, then what are we actually striving for? And so healthy ambition is how we get to a place of contentment, success, fulfillment, inner peace, which is really, for me, the point is inner peace. And this is exactly why the values and purpose piece are imperative. They are our blueprint to wholeness. It's how we align not only to magnetize the life we want, but to find fulfillment when we get there. And the journey from wounded ambition to healthy ambition isn't about achieving less, right? It's about building from a more self-aware place. It's about examining the stories we inherited, identifying what actually matters to us, and having the courage to pursue it. Let your ambition complete its mutation from parasite to companion. It's the best thing I've ever done. From something that devours you to something that walks alongside you. We do not have to betray ourselves to find the fulfillment we seek. And so I hope this episode was helpful. I hope it clarified ambition for you. I hope it gave you insight into your next step professionally. And I'm excited to hear what you guys think. If you've heard of these concepts before, if you relate to them, there's a lot of interesting new language here that I researched. And I'm grateful just to share it with you. And as someone who's living proof that you can change your ambition, you can still have big dreams, you can still do a lot and be a more thoughtful, loving, present person. And obviously still always on that road. Alignment is a zigzag. We go in and out of alignment. As my therapist says, life is about getting back to alignment. That is the constant work. But I'm so grateful for you guys for tuning in. And I look forward to seeing you all next week.